Where to start when jumping into comics? It can be very daunting since there are so many. Here at Thought Balloon, we are not just summarizing the comics, but also sharing our thoughts and opinions on what we have just covered. If there's any part of this that piques your interest and you don't want to be spoiled, you can pause the video and jump right into that comic. Or you may have read the comics we're covering and just want a quick refresher. Whatever the case may be, we hope you enjoy us geeking out. Who will stop the Juggernaut? Last issue, the X-Men went to Sean Cassidy, Banshee's, home estate for vacation, and now they face one of Marvel's greatest foes. The X-Men try to fight off Juggernaut, but Banshee goes after his cousin, Black Tom, and Storm is in a panic state because of her claustrophobia. Banshee and Black Tom continue to fight, and Black Tom explains that Banshee's power doesn't work on him, and that Juggernaut was only ever stopped by psychic powers, which the X-Men are lacking right now. Meanwhile, Juggernaut is destroying Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine. Wolverine uses Colossus as a weapon, which does little to no damage, and Wolverine tries to use his claws. Nightcrawler heads to help Storm, but she isn't breaking out of her panic, and Juggernaut steps in and toys with Storm before putting his focus back on Nightcrawler. In this moment, Storm is trying her best to help her X-Men, and it's shown to us the origin of her trauma. Summer 1941. Harlem, New York. Storm is 6 months old with her parents David Monroe and her mother, a Kenyan princess, as they move out of Harlem and head to Kenya. We learn Storm is actually African American, and her last name is Monroe. Cut to 5 years later in Kenya during the Suez War. As the family tries to escape to the American embassy, a fighter jet crashes into their home. Aurora wakes later in the debris of the crash and finds her mother dead in front of her. Then she escapes from the crash and wanders the streets of Cairo for years, where life was a blur until she met an old man who took her in and taught her to be one of the greatest thieves in Cairo. Then, at the age of 12, something within her drew her to the wilderness down south. There, her powers manifested, and she stayed with nature until Xavier recruited her for the X-Men. Now we cut to Xavier, who heard his name being called. He sees images through the telepathic rapport as the X-Men fight Kane Marco, the Juggernaut. Charles goes to ask Scott for help in the room where Jean and her roommate Misty Knight, another Marvel character who will appear in other comics and future X-Men comics. Charles leaves the room with Scott and Misty Knight asks if Jean is okay. Jean says yes, but asks the question, what would you do if you died and brought yourself back to life? Charles asks Scott to go help the X-Men, but Scott shuts down the idea right away. Scott explains that he won't help and that he needs to be with Jean. He explains that he can't help and wouldn't be able to get there in time anyway. He explains that the X-Men need to learn to do things on their own. Charles begins to bash Scott and would have been quite hurtful too, but is stopped because his images from his nightmare are visible to him in the window's reflection, and he begins to panic. Back to the X-Men. Juggernaut is still fighting with Wolverine and Nightcrawler. Meanwhile, Banshee fights his cousin. Nightcrawler stuns Juggernaut by hitting him in the eyes, but Black Tom shoots a beam at Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler may be dead as he lies in a shadowy area until little tiny men open a secret hatch and pull him away. Back to the fight, Black Tom explains that someone broke the two villains out of prison and is paying them to kill the X-Men. Now Colossus steps up to fight Juggernaut one-on-one. Colossus is then taken down, and Storm finally snaps out of panic to help Colossus. She throws a bolt, but it's reflected by Juggernaut back to her, and the fight is over. And now Professor X will have to come save the X-Men and fall into a trap. You remember those little tiny people that picked up Nightcrawler? Well, they're actually taking him off to safety, and they may be leprechauns? Well, anyway, they escort Nightcrawler, and when he wakes up, he eats with the butler of the castle, Eamon O'Donnell. O'Donnell explains that his family is being held hostage by Black Tom and that Black Tom and the Juggernaut are taking orders from Eric the Red. The leprechauns then jump into the conversation and explain to Nightcrawler that when they picked him up, his body disappeared in the shadows. Nightcrawler doesn't understand because he never had that ability before. But then he tests it out, and it turns out to be true. Nightcrawler, apart from his eyes, can become completely invisible within shadows. Then, a leprechaun enters the room and explains that X-Men are being held in a laboratory by the villains. Nightcrawler overhears Black Tom's plan to draw out Professor X, and Nightcrawler gets the idea to use his image inducer machine to impersonate Xavier. Nightcrawler gets the jump on Juggernaut and Black Tom. A little recap of Nightcrawler's abilities. He's very agile, can stick on walls. His tail acts as an extra limb, and mainly, he can teleport, which leaves his signature BAMF and brimstone smell. Nightcrawler manages to toy with the villains, and Juggernaut destroys a wall, which creates an opening to the outside. Using this, Storm summons a hurricane and frees most of the X Men. Wolverine mentions to Colossus that Storm is acting weird again, and Colossus, being the knight in shining armor, defends Storm's honor and tries to help Wolverine break from his shackles. Storm quickly lockpicks the shackles and explains that she's one of the best lockpicks in Cairo. Meanwhile, Banshee is being held hostage by Juggernaut and Black Tom as they climb to the top of the castle. Storm flies to the top to help Banshee. Down below, Colossus throws Wolverine to the top, and Colossus begins to climb. A turret pops out of the tower and shoots an intense blast at Storm. Storm's powers have caused a full blown hurricane to appear around the castle as the group fights. Meanwhile, Wolverine was thrown too far and is trying to figure out how to get back into the fight until a leprechaun appears and offers help. Wolverine cannot believe what he's seen, but he decides to follow. Meanwhile, Nightcrawler manages to free Banshee, and Banshee uses his powers to knock Juggernaut down to face the other X Men. Banshee then fights off Black Tom and gains the upper hand, tossing Black Tom into the sea. Juggernaut pushes the X Men aside and jumps to save Black Tom, explaining that he's his only friend. The two are swept away, and the storm clears the sky. The X Men stand victorious. Then cut to Eric the Red talking to a man on screen who explains that the X Men remain, and they must be dealt with before someone named Princess Naramani arrives on Earth. Eric the Red then explains that the X Men will fall because they are about to face Magneto. Following the last issue, the X Men were contacted by Moira McTaggart to inspect her research facility located on a small island. She hasn't heard back from Jamie Madrox, otherwise known as Multiple Man, who was left to look after the facility while Moira was away. The X-Men are having trouble securing a boat, but after a while, they find one and head off. As they approach the island, the boat is attacked, and the X-Men have to swim to shore. They spot the facility and explain that the boat was just ripped apart. And as they approach the facility, Colossus bumps into a force field surrounding the base. As that happens, the X-Men and the ground they were standing on are lifted and sent flying towards the facility. To help take the force of the impact, the X-Men destroy the wall and they crash into the building. As they land, Banshee has figured out who's behind this attack, but as he's about to explain, a wall explodes apart. Now, enter Magneto, and he's here to destroy the X-Men. As this happens, the Blackbird, the X-Men's jet, lands. Cyclops and Moira run out and head into the building. Cyclops explains that he's angry that Professor X has never told him of this secret mutant research center. Moira explains it's used to house and treat the most dangerous mutants, and that Professor X and her came up with the idea back when they were students. Moira leads Cyclops into the main lab, where they find Jamie Madrox. Jamie explains that he was attacked by Eric the Red, Havoc, and Polaris. Ready for another silly comic bit? In the Defenders comic issues during this time, Magneto was turned into a baby. But now he's being held at this research center, and Eric the Red broke in and reverted Magneto back to an adult and made an alliance with him. I personally believe that Magneto turning into a baby was set up to explain how to keep Magneto around while keeping him physically age appropriate to fighting the X-Men. Cyclops explains that the old X-Men were barely able to defeat Magneto, and the new X-Men don't have a shot. Now back to the X-Men. Wolverine is easily tossed aside by Magneto. Important to note that Wolverine is tossed aside solely by the metal on his claws. Then Colossus is easily picked up and used against his teammates. Storm tries to attack Magneto, but Magneto's powers allow him to set up a field around himself that reflects Storm's lightning bolts. It's important to understand how strong Magneto really is. In the movies and most media, he can only really control metal. But Magneto is the master of magnetism, and it grants him far more control than just metal. Back to the fight, Colossus tries to help, but he, made up of metal, is just thrown into the sea. Piles of scrap take out Nightcrawler, and Banshee takes on Magneto. Magneto actually explains that out of the new X-Men, Banshee is the only one worth fighting, because Banshee was the only one to put up a fight. However, the battle ends quickly when Magneto uses metal particles in the surrounding area to encapsulate Banshee. Cyclops finally arrives and shoots Magneto, causing him to shield himself and regain his strength. which allows for Cyclops to free the X-Men and explain to them that they need to dip because Magneto is too powerful. Wolverine argues, wanting to continue the fight, but the X-Men eventually run away. Magneto takes down his shield and explains that he has won. And as Magneto leaves, the comic shifts its attention to a mysterious room labeled Mutant X and quickly mentions that it is a story for later. Now, quickly cut to outer space. Across the universe, the crew on board a ship called the Star Jammer explains that if the Emperor turns on something called a dimensional gate, it can be the end of everything. Cut again to space, but now just above Earth, as a person explaining that she is here just in time to stop her brother, the Emperor's evil plan. But as she approaches Earth, her ship is about to be shot down by an Imperial ship. However, it's worth noting that we have seen this person before in Professor X's nightmare. Now, cut again. Professor X, along with Misty Knight, is with Jean as her parents are checking on her. But just outside their window, Eric the Red, along with Polaris and Havoc, are plotting. On a private airfield, the X-Men face Eric the Red. The X-Men unknowingly walked into a trap, and as Eric the Red is trying to explain himself, the X-Men are attacked by Firelord, a previous Herald of Galactus. The X-Men are easily defeated by Firelord, who meets up with Eric. Eric lies, saying the X-Men attacked him for no reason. Eric then has an inner monologue explaining how Firelord came in service to Eric. Firelord came to Earth and happened to run into Havoc and Polaris. Firelord defeated them, and Eric explained that they are the good guys, and the X Men are trying to take over the Earth. Now, back in the present, Firelord saw the X Men attack Eric without warning and is fully on Eric's side now. Firelord knows he now must take down the leader of the X Men, Professor X. Cut to space. A little funny bit, this part is making a Star Trek reference. An alien spaceship has been following a princess named Lalandra. It seems like the princess has gone rogue and is heading to Earth. A crew member scans Earth and gathers data, learning that Earth isn't just some random planet. Earth has dealt with Kree, Skrull, Badoon, and Celestials. But then the crew member explains that Earth has faced Galactus multiple times and defeated him. The captain does a complete 180, shoots a few missiles and flees, explaining that this planet rivals their whole empire. One missile destroys the princess's ship, but she manages to teleport to Earth. Now, cut to Earth, where Jean, along with her parents, is chatting with Professor X and Misty Knight. Jean's parents are finally catching up with their daughter when the princess teleports in. Xavier immediately freaks out. This alien is what has been in his nightmares, and now it's right in front of him. The princess faints, and the group helps her. Then, Firelord crashes into the room, demanding Princess Lalandra and Xavier. Jean Grey transforms into Phoenix and begins to fight Firelord. Phoenix has the upper hand in this fight, and Firelord is surprised, stating that Phoenix is on par with Thor. Eric watches the fight, and it's time to make his move. Meanwhile, back at Jean's house, Lalandra has woken up and tells Xavier she came for him. And Xavier explains that she should take it easy, explaining that he has telepathically taught her English. Eric the Red enters, and Lalandra recognizes him as Shikari. Eric explains yes, he is Shikari, and he was banished to Earth. Now he's here to take the princess back for execution. He then zaps the room. Now, shortly after Shikari is on the roof, constructing a device called a Stargate, the X-Men come flying in on a hoverjet that is then shot down. Cut to Phoenix dropping a sick line and blasting Firelord miles away. As she's about to head off to finish him, which, might I add, is something X-Men don't do, Professor X telepathically explains to Jean that the X-Men need help. Meanwhile, she explains to herself that her new powers are like a drug, and she feels great, and that part of her still wants to kill Firelord. Cut to the X-Men. As they fall from their ship earlier, Storm flies carrying Colossus and Wolverine, and Banshee carries Cyclops. Nightcrawler swiftly makes his way up the building to Eric, who he sees carrying Lalandra away to the Stargate. He arrives just a second late, and Eric is gone. On the roof, Nightcrawler has no idea what is happening, and Storm is shocked to see Phoenix flying. Jean's parents are so confused seeing costume people everywhere, including their daughter. Xavier is still yelling about Lalandra, and now finally, Phoenix gives some much needed exposition. She explains that Xavier telepathically told her that Lilandra led a revolt against her brother who was about to do something that could destroy the universe. The revolt failed and she came to Earth to seek help from the X-Men, but Eric the Red prevented that. Now, Phoenix displays her powers by powering up the Stargate to teleport and follow Eric. Cyclops even mentions to himself that Jean was the weakest X-Men member, but now is crazy strong. Cyclops then explains, well, if the universe is in danger, then let's go save it. The X-Men and the whole group jump into the Stargate. Jean's parents are still complaining, and then Firelord flies in demanding to fight Phoenix, but Xavier explains that they left, and it's up to the X-Men to save the universe. The next issue starts exactly where the last left off. Firelord is watching as Professor X is losing it. Xavier's mind cleared when Lilandra appeared, but then got a lot worse when she left. He starts to hallucinate that Misty Knight is Moira, and that she is helping ease the pain Xavier is in. It's here that we actually learn that Moira and Xavier were in a relationship some time ago. For the rest of the comic issue, nothing really important happens. Seriously, this issue is really just a filler piece. And if you must know what happens, Xavier imagines a whole nightmare scenario of the X-Men in the Danger Room, and they're fighting the old X-Men and an evil version of Xavier. Really, what this issue represents is that Xavier has his powers again. Now to the fun stuff. The X-Men have gone through the Stargate and are now across the universe. Standing in front of a group of aliens, the X-Men explain they are here to save Lilandra, but then the main man of the Imperial Guard, Gladiator, explains that the princess is a traitor and that they won't give her up. Cyclops starts blasting, and the Imperials fight the X-Men. The X-Men during this fight are working perfectly together. Banshee and Storm are using their flying abilities to maintain air power. Nightcrawler and Colossus fight against their foes, but pause when a character named Hobgoblin, not the Spider Man villain, shapeshifts to what looks like a dragon. And Nightcrawler uses his image inducer to also appear as the same monster, which scares Hobgoblin out of the fight. Meanwhile, Wolverine slashes through his crowd and goes after a character named Oracle. But behind him is a character named Starbolt, who blasts Wolverine. And to the foe's surprise, Wolverine still stands. Wolverine takes out the two. He's now naked and bullies an alien for his clothes. The Emperor Ken explains that Lalandra is chosen worthy of champions, but it doesn't matter because he has summoned something called a soul drinker to kill his sister. Cyclops, who's been with Phoenix, who's still in a weakened state from opening the Stargate, tries to help, but it's Nightcrawler who teleports to save the princess. Nightcrawler frees Lalandra and tries to get her to move, but she's terrified of the monster, so he decides to teleport with her. This is the first time he's ever teleported with anyone else. Nightcrawler and Lalandra teleport to Cyclops and Phoenix, and Cyclops asks the princess to explain what is happening. Lalandra explains that her brother found an ancient power and wanted to use it for himself, but Lalandra opposed his plan, and he had her arrested. But rumors spread that she tried to kill her brother and usurp the throne, and a civil war began. Lalandra escaped on a small ship, and when thinking what to do, she saw the face of Xavier in her mind. Xavier was fighting an alien villain that came to Earth in earlier issues, and uses his powers in a major way during that time, so somehow this allowed him to connect to Lalandra's mind so far away. Spies intercepted the mind connection, and it's here that Eric the Red, who is an Imperial spy, has a new goal to kill Lalandra or stop her from reaching Xavier. That explains why Eric the Red decided to fight the X-Men earlier. Cyclops is like, pause. What is your evil brother exactly after? Lalandra explains that there's this thing called the M'Kron crystal, which is the gateway to absolute power, and it only opens once every million years when these things called Death Stars align. Gladiator then interjects Lalandra, and we cut to X-Men fighting again and then back to Gladiator trying to get Lalandra under control. Cyclops has an I-beam contest with an alien, and the two are knocked out. And Lalandra tries to explain that Gladiator needs to listen to her, that all she knows about this absolute power is that it's called the end of all that is. Before Gladiator can get a word in, he's blasted by the newly arrived Corsair, the leader of the Starjammers. The Jammers help the X-Men and the fight is quickly wrapped up. Here's a quick look at the Starjammers, and just to preface this, my pronunciation may not be exactly right. But we have Corsair, Chod and Kree, Hepzibah, and Raza. The X-Men and Starjammers greet each other, and Phoenix notices the leader Corsair is human and from Earth. So she peeks into his mind and is shocked by what she discovers. But before that, we are interrupted by the Emperor, who explains that he will conquer the X-Men and make them his slaves because the Death Stars have aligned and the gateway is opened. Power starts to pour into the M'Kraan crystal until it glows just as bright as a star, and then it explodes, and in that moment, all of existence blinks. Now cut to the Star Corps and its creator, Peter Corbeau, who was calling Reed Richards Mr. Fantastic. Peter explains that for a fraction of a second, all of existence ceased to exist, and if these blinks continue to happen, the fabric of time and space will rip apart, and the universe will die.
Hey everyone, I'm Nathan.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Aiden.
All right, so let's get into this video because there's a lot to cover. First, Aiden, any thoughts?
There was a couple smaller things that I was intrigued by in this issue. Is this the first time we see Wolverine having metal claws?
No, it's not the first time, but everyone kind of knows that Wolverine's whole skeleton is metal, right? The only reason that we pointed it out when he's fighting Magneto is because at this point in the comics, the only part that Wolverine has metal, that the adamantium, is on his claws. Right now he doesn't have a skeleton, a metal skeleton.
So isn't there something like his claws are a part of his suit and not actually a part of himself? Or is that something else I'm thinking of?
That was the case prior to last video. We covered that, if you remember, when he gets captured with Banshee and Jean, up to that point in X-Men comics and Marvel comics, it was part of the suit, but that officially made it so that it's actually part of his anatomy.
Okay. So, but just the claws,
Yeah.
though, and there's no explanation.
Just the claws.
As to why they're metal. Okay.
Yeah, future X-Men comics will cover that he went, through the testing stuff. Later, shortly after this, actually, he's gonna run into Alpha Flight, and that's the whole thing that goes into more Wolverine's backstory.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also had another interesting thing. So we see Jean Grey kind of become drunk with her power. So is that something that is a part of her personality, or is that something that the power does to anyone that obtains it? Do you know what I mean?
It's a yes and no answer. Phoenix whole thing gets rewritten a million times. Whenever Phoenix is brought up again, her powers, her origin story, it's changed. Right now in the comics that we just covered, it's just the power, that immense power that Jean has is just, it's that thing where it's absolute power corrupts absolute. That's all it is.
Oh, okay.
Right now. As we go on, and more comics are covered, it goes more in depth with it, but as of right now, that's just what it is.
Because I have a feeling we'll see some more of this creeping into Jean Grey's regular life.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another thing that everyone kind of knows. Eventually, Dark Phoenix.
Yeah,
that's one of the most popular stories ever. We'll be covering it soon. It's actually the Phoenix Saga is actually. The Phoenix Saga is actually a lot longer than people kind of realize. Phoenix herself as Jean Grey is going to be covered in the next comics. Dark Phoenix, that saga doesn't happen until a little bit later. But it is it builds up to it. And that's kind of something that we talked about last video.
Yeah.
Where now the story arcs are being a little fleshed out and drawn out, and so there's going to be a lot of build up. Everything after to this point, sorry, a lot of all of the story arcs after this point that we just covered, it's going to be built over a very long time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to see that though. I'm excited to see how Professor X deals with that because I feel like
Yeah,
he
it's
kind of
really
took
cool.
her under. I feel like she's the real prodigy, whereas
Yeah.
Cyclops is like thinks he is.
Yeah. All right. Nick, any thoughts?
I just thought it was interesting how much the X-Men deal with like outer space and different space empires.
Mhm.
Like in this one, we see Gladiator and the Shi'ar Empire, which is like a pretty big deal because Gladiator is a really important figure in everything outer space. So it's really interesting to see him just pop up out of nowhere in X-Men.
Yeah. Well, I was going to bring that up later too, but we could talk about it right now. From what I know, from my understanding, and if this isn't the case, I'll fact check myself right now. But the X-Men introduced that.
They're the first ones to have Gladiator and the Shi'ar.
The X-Men introduced all of these characters. Aiden, are you familiar with like Gladiator and all of these characters or no?
Only through Marvel Snap.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let me give you guys a quick refresher. Outside of Marvel Earth, there's only like really a couple factions in space, right? You could think of like the Nova Guardians, the Kree and stuff like that. Part of it is the Shi'ar Empire, which X-Men introduced. They're the ones to introduce that. Claremont and his run of this X-Men, they weren't introduced prior to this. And like what Nick brought up was these characters are very important, like down the line, even to like today. Like not too long ago, a new comic issue actually just started called The Imperials. Gladiator is kind of like the main figure in space, really, with like, like you think about space, it's like Silver Surfer, Thor, Beta Ray Bill.
Yeah.
But Gladiator is like up there. He's very much like honestly a D-list like character, but when it comes to the actual lore of Marvel, he's really important. So yeah, this is kind of like the first introduction of him. He will show up a lot. He shows up a lot when it's and that's because Lilandra is kind of really tied into Xavier and the future of the X-Men stuff. But yeah, it's really cool to see these characters introduced because I mean this video kind of acts like if you also want an introduction into those characters, this is their origin story pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
They get they're gonna pop up a lot. The Starjammers are really important too. The Starjammers are really cool actually. They kind of only during this time they only appear with the X-Men, but it's really cool. They're really cool. They're kind of like what a lot of people kind of think of the Guardians like now, like James Gunn's Guardians.
Yeah.
The Starjammers are kind of like that
That's
right now.
That's the vibe I was getting to. I was about to say. It reminds me of.
Yeah, they're.
What was the name of the pirates in that series?
Corsair. Oh, and Guardians.
His family that he's from.
Like Yondu.
The Ravagers.
The Ravagers. Yeah, it's giving me Ravagers vibes.
Yeah, the Starjammers are really cool. Really, really cool. But yeah, the Imperials are just really cool too, just because like how big they grow in the Marvel like lore. And they just kind of start off as like a side adventure of the X-Men.
That's so cool how much
that was
get
really cool.
with this like one chunk of the X-Men. I didn't realize how much they've introduced just as like side enemies basically for them to battle.
Yeah, we do get a lot.
I think they're coming out swinging like we said before. Like I don't think that the ball is slowed at all for them. Like they're like we have to keep pumping stuff out.
Yeah, and it doesn't really slow down either. Another thing I wanted to cover during that fight, during this issue is, I mean, there's so much shit that happens here. There's a lot of stuff that happens. But one thing that I wanted to point out when I was reading it was everyone knows Wolverine's brown outfit. You know what I mean? Like his yellow, orange, brown outfit. I personally think that when he is stripped naked in this fight, and he bullies an alien, it looks like that outfit, and he's gonna wear it for like the next video, or sorry, the next couple issues. And I think honestly they like that look on him, that it eventually turned like that was the prototype of his brown outfit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you thought
Like,
they saw that panel and they were like, you know what? The
yeah,
coloring looks good.
yeah, like it works. Yeah. It also kind of looks like Sabretooth's outfit. I mean, I'll put it up right now. It kind of has like the fur and like a skull, like, or like a necklace on it, but it's just like the brown and yellow. I think they like, yeah, I think they like, hey, that was a good look. Let's bring it back, but make it more Wolverine.
I like the brown and yellow look. I've heard people say online that they think it's ugly, but
I could see that. Honestly, I feel like, okay, I'm just gonna like spitball. I think like in 20 issues, give or take, I think maybe a little bit more, Wolverine only wears the brown and yellow outfit. He doesn't actually get his like iconic blue and yellow outfit again until like the 90s, late 80s.
oh wow.
He wears the brown and yellow one for a really long time.
I do
And
think the blue and yellow is more heroic looking, but the brown and
Yeah.
yellow feels like kind of more animalistic, not so
Yeah.
much like
and
a good guy. You know what I mean? Like he kind of feels
Yeah.
an anti-hero.
and I honestly think that, well, one, especially when the new mutants are introduced, the idea of that the X-Men are like the main team, and that they are like part of the original X-Men run. It's brought up that the X-Men, when you're part of the team, you don't get your own individual super suit until like you graduate.
Oh yeah.
And because like this new X-Men team, you know, they're pretty much, you know, they graduated, they're adults, they're not teenagers. Each one has their own outfit. Wolverine, like I said earlier, he doesn't get his blue and yellow suit again until the Jim Lee era starts in X-Men, where the team gets like split up into like blue and gold. So I feel like he gets that suit back because he's like, everyone gets like the X-Men outfit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of loses their individual outfit and it's replaced with a team outfit. But I feel I personally feel like the brown and yellow is more Wolverine outfit than the X-Men outfit, if that makes sense.
No, I agree.
Any other comments?
I just want to say thank you to all of our viewers and our commenters.
Yeah. That's been very, very, very fun.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see a response on our first video, and I'm like super happy to see it.
Yeah, our dedicated fan base. They've been waiting for this next video. We took a little too long.
We got more content on the way. Don't worry.
Very much. We're stockpiling. All right. I think we just leave it off here. See you next time.
Thank you.